Okay, imagine this. You're in Jerusalem, about to enter Hezekiah's tunnel.
Oh, wow.
Pitch black, narrow, with just inches of water underfoot.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you're not usually claustrophobic,
Ah,
I bet that inner chatter of worry would start to kick in, right?
I think so.
Well, that's precisely where we're diving in today.
Yeah.
You shared this YouTube webinar from the Anxiety and Depression Association of America,
Mhm.
and I have to say, it's fascinating.
Yeah, it really is.
The webinar features psychologist Ken Goodman,
Right.
who actually uses this experience in the tunnel to illustrate how quickly our minds jump to worst-case scenarios.
Yeah, he describes like his own anxiety building
Yeah.
as he imagines getting stuck.
Oh, wow.
The adrenaline
Yeah,
surge.
yeah.
But then he makes a conscious decision to enter the tunnel
Right.
and the worry just melts away.
He describes it like flipping a switch.
Exactly.
So is he saying that just making a decision,
Yeah,
focusing on that present moment, can help quiet that mental noise?
exactly.
Wow.
It's a powerful reminder. Okay. That while worry is a natural human response,
Mm-hmm.
and even beneficial at times, as Ken points out,
Right.
we don't have to let it control us.
And what I found interesting is that Ken doesn't just talk theory.
Yeah.
He brings in a client, Jennifer, who bravely shares her own journey with anxiety.
Right.
Hearing her talk about her experiences, it really struck me how random and intense worry can feel.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 1 minute you're fine.
Right.
The next you're spiraling into what if land.
The dreaded what if trap.
Yes.
That's where anxiety can really take hold.
Okay.
Jennifer talks about everything from fears of choking during a presentation to health anxieties.
Mm-hmm.
She describes feeling a physical sensation,
Right.
maybe a racing heart,
Oh, yeah.
and her mind instantly jumps to a heart attack.
Oh, wow.
It's like our brains latch onto those worst-case scenarios,
Uh-huh.
especially when they tap into personal experiences or values.
So if someone in your family has had a heart attack, statistically,
Yeah.
you're more likely to worry about it yourself.
Precisely.
Wow.
And here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
Ken explains that a lot of things we do to feel safer, those anxious behaviors,
Right.
actually end up maintaining the worry cycle.
So, like constantly checking things,
Mm-hmm.
seeking reassurance, even excessive Googling,
Yeah.
those actually make things worse in the long run.
It seems counterintuitive,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
they might provide temporary relief,
Right.
but ultimately they fuel the anxiety.
Got it.
It's like pouring gasoline on a fire you're trying to put out.
Ooh, good analogy.
And this is where Jennifer's story becomes so inspiring.
Yeah.
She talks about how stopping those behaviors was a crucial first step in calming her mind.
I'm curious, what kind of tools did they talk about for interrupting those anxious thought patterns?
Mm-hmm.
Because honestly, when I'm in that what-if spiral, it feels impossible to break free.
Well, they actually suggest some surprisingly simple techniques.
Oh, really?
Things like snapping your fingers, labeling the thought a scammer, or even finding an object and spelling it backward.
Spelling it backward.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It might sound silly,
Yeah,
but those actions shift your attention, disrupting the worry cycle.
got it.
Jennifer says incorporating these techniques into her daily life, along with therapy and self-help,
Mm-hmm.
significantly reduced her anxiety levels.
The scammer analogy really resonates with me.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like your anxiety is trying to sell you a story, a
Exactly.
bill of goods that you don't have to buy.
Right.
And hearing Jennifer talk about her progress going from constant worry to managing it effectively,
Yeah.
it gives me hope that change is possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it underscores Ken's point that anticipatory anxiety is a terrible predictor of the future.
Right.
He even suggests a worry inventory exercise.
Okay.
You write down all your past worries and see how many actually came true.
Oh, interesting.
Often, the results can be quite eye-opening.
Okay, that's a great idea. I'm definitely trying that.
Cool.
It's about training ourselves to recognize that while those anxious thoughts are powerful,
Uh-huh.
they aren't necessarily accurate.
Right.
It reminds me of what they were saying about externalizing anxiety.
Yes.
Can you remind me about that?
Visualizing your anxiety as that scammer, constantly calling with false information.
Right.
The key is learning to hang up on that scammer,
Okay.
disengaging from the anxious thought.
So like blocking those annoying telemarketer calls.
Yes.
And what about those more ingrained anxieties?
Mm.
Things like social fears or performance anxiety.
Ken uses this brilliant surfing analogy.
Okay.
You can't learn to surf without waves, right?
Right.
Similarly, we need those worrisome thoughts, those physical sensations,
Okay.
to practice responding differently.
Yeah.
Instead of fearing those feelings, We can see them as opportunities to develop resilience
I love that.
and actually rewire our brains.
And Jennifer actually shares her experience with this simple breathing technique called 3 by 3 breathing. 3 seconds in, 3 seconds out.
Yes.
Easy.
Slow, deep breaths help regulate your heart rate and calm your nervous system.
Okay.
It's like hitting a reset button.
Oh, nice.
Jennifer found that consistent practice, even when she wasn't feeling anxious,
Wow.
significantly reduced a common symptom for her shortness of breath.
Oh, interesting.
It taps into something called the vagus nerve,
Okay.
which plays a key role in regulating our stress response.
So it's not just about managing anxiety in the moment,
Right.
but also building that resilience over time.
Exactly.
And while therapy and self-help are crucial,
Right.
Ken also acknowledges that medication can be a valuable tool for some people. He's talking about antidepressants, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And he explains that they can help reduce the intensity and frequency of those anxious thoughts, which in turn can make therapy techniques even more effective.
It's like giving your brain a little extra support to do the work.
That's a great way to put it. It's all about finding that right combination of tools for each individual.
So for you listening in, what's resonating with you the most so far?
Think about those anxieties you're facing.
Yeah.
What steps could you take today to start reclaiming control? Would trying one of those thought-stopping techniques help?
Right?
Exploring Ken's Anxiety Solution series, perhaps?
Yeah.
Or maybe reaching out to a therapist is the next step.
Whatever it is, remember that even small, consistent actions can create big changes.
Yeah.
You have the power to rewire your brain towards calm and resilience.
And before we move to the next part of our deep dive,
Okay.
take a moment to reflect on one specific action you can commit to this week.
Yeah.
What will it be?
I love that.
Okay,
We'll be right back.
it really is about giving your brain that extra support to do the work.
And it's interesting because Jennifer actually talks about how in the beginning she'd have to use those thought-stopping techniques multiple times in a row.
Oh, wow.
Like she'd snap her fingers,
Yeah.
then maybe spell a few different objects backward to really disrupt that worry cycle.
Yeah, it really highlights that this is a process, not a quick fix.
Right.
And that consistency is key.
And that can be so discouraging, can it?
Yeah.
Because when you're in the midst of anxiety, you just want it to stop.
Right.
But Jennifer also talks about how the more she practiced these techniques, the more natural they became,
Yeah.
almost like a reflex.
Exactly. It's like learning any new skill.
Right.
The more you do it, the more ingrained it becomes.
Yeah.
And she even shares some creative ways to adapt those techniques for different situations.
Oh, really?
Like snapping your fingers discreetly under a table or by your side if you're in public.
Oh, smart.
So people don't think you're having a tic.
Right.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. It reminds me of something else Ken mentioned.
So,
The importance of having a counterweight to those constant worries.
yeah.
Something positive to focus on regularly.
That's where resources like his Anxiety Solution series can be so helpful.
Oh, right.
Jennifer talks about how she still listens to it daily,
Really?
almost like a meditation.
Wow.
It's like having a virtual therapist in your pocket, offering guidance and support.
I love that. It's like actively nurturing your mental well-being, just like we would our physical health.
Exactly.
Speaking of, Ken compares this process to planting a garden.
Oh, interesting.
You have to put in the effort,
Yeah.
nurture the soil, and tend to those plants consistently to see them flourish.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
It's so true.
It is.
We have to consistently practice those techniques.
Right.
Nourish ourselves with positive input to cultivate that calmer, more resilient inner landscape.
But what about those worries that can't easily be proven or disproven?
Yeah.
Like long-term fears about, say, climate change or the economy.
That's such a good question.
Yeah.
Because those are anxieties I struggle with too.
Right.
Sometimes it feels like those what-ifs about the future can really take over.
And that's when it becomes even more crucial to focus on what we can control, our own responses to those anxieties. Instead of getting caught up in the what-ifs of the future, we gently bring ourselves back to the present moment.
So we practice those thought-stopping techniques. We engage in activities that bring us joy and a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
We focus on actions we can take in our own lives to make a positive difference,
Right.
even if it feels small.
Absolutely. And Ken also has some very practical advice about limiting exposure to things that trigger those anxieties.
Oh, like what?
Like, for example, being mindful of how much news you consume.
That's a good one.
Especially in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with information,
Yeah,
it's so important to create those boundaries, isn't it?
definitely.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about different techniques and strategies,
Right.
but what about medication?
Yeah.
Can it play a role in managing anxiety?
That's a question that comes up a lot. And while Ken emphasizes that therapy and self-help are foundational,
Right.
he also acknowledges that medication can be incredibly helpful for some people,
Yeah.
especially when it's used in conjunction with therapy.
He's talking about antidepressants, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
He explains that when they're effective, antidepressants can reduce the intensity and frequency of those anxious thoughts,
Mm.
which can make those therapy techniques we were talking about even more effective.
But I also imagine there can be a lot of fear and uncertainty around taking medication,
Yeah,
especially with all the potential side effects you hear about.
you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And Ken really emphasizes the importance of trusting your doctor,
Okay.
starting with a low dose
Yeah.
and being patient with the process.
And avoiding Dr. Google at all costs.
Definitely.
Because let's be honest, Googling side effects can send anyone into a spiral of worry.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
It's about having that open communication with your healthcare provider
Right.
and finding the right approach for you. Remember, there's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to managing anxiety.
Right. Everyone's journey is unique.
Mm-hmm.
And Jennifer actually talks about how before therapy, her anxiety was so constant that it felt like she was pushing through it all the time.
Yeah.
She describes it as being at a 9 or a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10,
Oh, gosh.
almost constantly.
Which is incredibly debilitating.
Right.
But with therapy and consistent practice of those techniques, she's now at a 3 to 5, with
Ah,
occasional spikes, of course.
wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It really shows that even with severe anxiety, significant improvement is possible.
It does.
And it speaks volumes about the power of finding the right tools and putting in the work.
It does. And Jennifer emphasizes that it's not about questioning whether you need to use those techniques.
Right.
Just do it.
Yeah.
The more you practice, the more natural and effective they become.
It's like building that muscle memory for managing anxiety.
Exactly.
What I'm hearing is that it's not about eliminating anxiety altogether, right?
That's an important point.
Yeah.
Anxiety is a normal human experience.
Yeah.
We're not aiming to erase it completely,
Okay.
but rather to develop the skills to navigate it effectively.
Got it.
We're learning to ride the waves, so to speak, instead of getting wiped out by them.
I love that.
Yeah.
And what really struck me is how Ken ends this section by saying, don't give up hope.
Oh.
Because I think for a lot of people struggling with anxiety, it can feel so isolating and hopeless at times.
Right.
But he reminds us that there are so many resources available, from the ADA website to finding a therapist to support groups and all those self-help materials.
It's about reaching out,
Yeah.
finding what works for you, and remembering that you are not alone in this journey.
So to bring this back to you, the listener, what's resonating with you most from this conversation?
What are those anxieties you're facing?
Right.
And what steps can you take starting today to start reclaiming control? Maybe it's trying one of those thought-stopping techniques,
Yeah.
exploring self-help resources.
Right. Or finally reaching out to a therapist.
Whatever it is, remember that even small, consistent actions can create powerful shifts in your life. You have the power to rewire your brain towards a calmer, more fulfilling existence.
And before we move to the final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
take a moment to reflect on one specific action you can commit to this week.
Yeah.
What will it be?
You know, it's amazing how much we've already unpacked about anxiety.
It really is.
We've talked about how those anxious thoughts and feelings, while definitely uncomfortable,
Right.
can actually be opportunities for growth if we approach them the right way.
Yeah, if we look at them a little differently.
And we've explored so many practical strategies.
Right.
Everything from those thought-stopping techniques and breathing exercises to the power of externalizing anxiety and even considering medication when appropriate.
Yeah, the whole toolbox.
It is.
Full of tools.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to circle back to something Ken said that really struck me.
He talks about the importance of welcoming what we don't want.
That does sound a bit paradoxical.
It does, doesn't it?
Welcoming what we don't want.
But essentially he's saying that instead of fearing those anxious thoughts and feelings,
Right.
we can learn to see them as signals, as chances to practice our coping skills and rewire our brains.
It's like inviting those anxieties in for tea and then politely showing them the door.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
But I get it. It's about taking away their power.
Right.
And Jennifer's journey is such a great illustration of this.
Yeah, it really is.
She talks about how she used to try to push through her anxiety,
Hmm.
ignore it, pretend it wasn't there.
Oh, yeah, just white-knuckling it.
But once she learned to acknowledge it,
Right.
use those tools we discussed,
Yeah.
and even welcome those uncomfortable feelings as part of the process,
Uh-huh.
that's when things really started to shift for her.
It's about recognizing that we can't always control those thoughts and sensations from popping up, but we can control how we respond to them.
And the more we practice those healthy responses, the more automatic they become.
Exactly.
It's like creating a new, healthier habit,
Uh-huh.
like swapping out that sugary soda for a glass of water.
I like that.
But what about setbacks?
Oh, yeah.
Because let's be real, those
Right.
happen.
They do.
There will be days when those anxieties feel bigger and stronger than others.
Right.
What do we do then?
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
This is a journey, not a destination.
Mm-hmm.
There will be ups and downs.
Right.
And that's where those resources we've been talking about come in.
Okay.
The ADAA website, Ken's Anxiety Solution Series, Finding a Therapist,
Yeah.
they're like tools in your toolbox that you can turn to for support and guidance when you need them.
Exactly. It's about remembering that you're not alone in this
Right.
and that there's help available.
Always.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into calming that inner chatter,
Yeah.
I want to leave you with this image. Imagine yourself facing one of those anxieties that used to completely overwhelm you.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's that big presentation at work or that social gathering that used to fill you with dread.
Right.
But this time, you have those tools we've talked about.
Mhm.
You have that awareness, that resilience.
When practicing.
You take a deep breath.
Right.
You label that thought a scammer.
Yeah.
You shift your focus.
Mm-hmm.
And you choose to respond differently.
You've got options now.
And in that moment, you reclaim your power.
It's powerful stuff.
You realize that you are not defined by your anxiety.
It doesn't control you anymore.
You are capable, you are strong, and you are on a path towards a calmer, more fulfilling life.
That's beautiful.
Keep practicing, keep believing in yourself, and keep moving forward.
Yeah, you've got this.
We'll see you in the next deep dive.